Good afternoon and welcome to Construction Week's KSA Infrastructure Summit. My name is Ashley Williams. I'm the editor of Construction Week Middle East, and I will be today's moderator and host for our virtual conference. We are absolutely thrilled that we are able to bring together some of the leading names from Saudi Arabia's construction sector over the next 2 days, shedding light on the world-class infrastructure that is currently progressing within the kingdom. We are continually seeing Saudi Arabia's huge ambitions come to life through its impressive range of giga projects. And our objective as a brand and for this conference is to continue supporting the kingdom's journey through discussion and interaction on some of the most important topics for the construction sector. Our experts over the next 2 days will be exploring the challenges and opportunities for infrastructure growth, the acceleration of sustainable and thought-provoking transport systems, movements for social infrastructure coming into fruition, and public-private partnership projects becoming among the most reliable sources of new business for infrastructure projects. We have our event guide available for our attendees in the handout section, where you can view every single detail about our conference over the next 2 days. While we are still facing obstacles with market conditions, we've proven that through our outstanding success at our Leaders KSA event in September 2020, that we can provide insight and educate our readers through a virtual event once again. I'd like to show huge appreciations to our events and conference team for setting up today's event. I can assure you it's been not an easy task to put this together. And I just want to thank everyone who has been involved in securing some of our incredible speakers for our event. But of course, we can't forget thanking our sponsors, who are Platinum sponsor Diriyah Development Authority, Gold sponsors Albizreh, Autodesk and ACCIONA, and our education partner, the University of Manchester. I'm already seeing many people tuning in at the moment, which is fantastic to see. And make sure to get your questions ready at the end of each session to ask our panelists. Now, let's kick things off. And what a way to start the conference today with a keynote speech from Diriyah Development Authority's Chief Design and Development Officer, Jonathan Timms. Jonathan, take it away.
Thanks, Ashley, and I appreciate the welcome, and thank you to everyone who's tuned in today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the current landscape of Saudi Arabia's infrastructure sector. Vision 2030 represents the strategic framework for the transformation and future of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, led by His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. As part of this vision, one component is that Riyadh's population plans to increase from 7.5 million today to more than 15 to 20 million people. This extraordinary growth will make Riyadh one of the top 10 economies in the world, and it's currently in 40th. That's a staggering 14% year-on-year growth for Riyadh. Infrastructure will be a key enabler of this growth. With this ambitious growth comes significant challenges, especially on our existing infrastructure networks, and particularly the pressure on local authorities and suppliers that we already have in the kingdom. Much progress has already been made, from desalination plants for drinking water, where we are already the most efficient producer in the world, our national power supply, where consumers can now contribute to the power grid through their own solar cells, and our $23 billion US, 175 kilometre, 85 station Riyadh Metro, which is in the final stages of delivery. Riyadh has several key large projects like Misk City, King Salman Square, and Diriyah Gate, Qiddiya, of course. And there's some significant water challenges. KSA is obviously has, water is very scarce and now already produces more than 5 million cubic meters of desalination water per annum. In terms of power, KSA is the fastest growing electricity consumer in the Middle East. And although that supply has been boosted by the recent permission for consumers to contribute with their own solar supply, but that capacity is planned to go to 120 gigawatts by 2032. Renewables will be key, as I said, and rebalancing the road network. The current split 80-20 between private car and public transport will be transformed by two projects. Firstly, the 1,900-kilometre long bus network, and of course the metro project that I spoke about just before. I wanted to talk a little bit about Diriyah Gate and its place and what we're doing and some of our infrastructure challenges. DGDA was established in 2017 as an independent government authority to develop this amazing heritage and tourism precinct, and it's central to Vision 2030. We're contributing to Vision 2030 in three key ways. Firstly, the creation of a vibrant society, a thriving economy, and also an ambitious nation. Our mission is to showcase Saudi Arabia's 300 plus years of authentic history through delivering an amazing heritage experience, empowering education, world-class entertainment, and outstanding lifestyle, including a vibrant shopping and dining precinct. We have two master plans, and we're about to announce a third master plan, which I'll speak about shortly. Our first master plan, Diriyah Gate, which is a 55 billion, 7 square kilometre project, which is essentially a mud city, which I'll talk about a bit more in detail. And What is Far, very different, 11 billion, 60 square kilometre exclusive residential community. We're about to announce a 3.6 million square metre GFA project on an adjoining site as the next phase of Diriyah's expansion. So with these significant master plans comes some significant bulk infrastructure requirements. I won't go through all the detail, you can see them on the screen. We have 1500 MVA power requirement. We're just starting building a 380 kV bulk substation. And we're removing almost 8 million cubic metres of rock from our site up to a depth of 35 metres. And that will become clear later on in the presentation. So a little bit more about Diriyah Gate. Firstly, we plan to deliver this in almost all of its entirety by 2024. It's on the outskirts of Riyadh in the southwest in the key growth corridor, only 20 minutes from the centre of Riyadh and 35 minutes to the airport. As I said, it's a 55 billion cultural and lifestyle destination. It will have a population of over 100,000. We'll have annual visitors of more than 25 to 30 million by 2030. One component includes 20 luxury hotels, over 3,000 rooms, more than 100 restaurants, 20 plus cultural attractions, including some key iconic museums, and then more than 500 lifestyle and retail luxury brand experiences. Everything we do at DGDA is centred around At-Taif, our UNESCO World Heritage listed mud city, which is so critically important to the kingdom and every Saudi. The first, second and third Saudi state were formed right here in Diriyah, and it's the home and history of the Al Saud family. So what our vision for our project is essentially recreating and expanding this same form of architecture across a large master plan, some 1.2 million square metres of GFA. And our vision is clear. It's a Najdi Diriyah design. So it very much, Najdi architecture originated in and around Diriyah, and it's a beautiful type of architecture. And as you'll see with some of the images, this is one of our hotels on the escarpment edge overlooking the Wadi. Our high-end retail strip, we'll have more than 50 luxury retailers and will be the #1 destination for luxury retail in Riyadh. One of our souks and retail dining destinations. A key challenge for us is our subsurface infrastructure, or access and egress and parking. As a historic mud city, we don't have any cars, almost no cars on grade. So it provides, with the size of our destination, provides a huge challenge. We have more than 25,000 car bays underground and key connections from buses, the metro, all subsurface. And you can see this is one of our tunnels that we're doing on site at the moment, the excavation for. And if you look at Diriyah Gate's own infrastructure needs, and once again I won't go through each item, it includes 55 kilometres of roads and 15 kilometres of tunnels on what is a fairly small site of 7 square kilometres. What is far is only a kilometre down the road, but a very, very different master plan. It has 96 exclusive farm plots, mostly around 100,000 square metres. It includes 5 ultra-luxury iconic hotels and 5 luxury hotels. We're creating the Royal Diriyah Equestrian and Polo Club. We've got 2 golf courses, a 27-hole Greg Norman Championship golf course and an 18-hole Robert Trent Jones Jr. Championship golf course. You can see some of the images of what is far, and if you drive out to what is far, the topography and the landscape is just awe-inspiring. This is a render of the Royal Diriyah Equestrian and Polo Club, one of the farm plots, and this is the clubhouse for the Greg Norman Championship golf course. So once again, What is Far has a unique set of infrastructure challenges, being the size of the site being over 60 square kilometres, all being used, but at fairly low density, creates some challenges, and we're creating over almost 100 kilometres of roads as an example. So plenty of challenges, but there's some significant specific challenges that we found within Riyadh and for DGDA. All the large projects within Riyadh are working to different timescales, which means that when we're dealing with different authorities, there's a real risk of inefficiency. As an example, we have to bring our TSE line from more than 40 kilometres away to service our development. Now, working with MWC, that can be done. However, we're also aware that we have major developments around us, all working at different time frames. So we've been trying to coordinate with all of those. With maybe they haven't finished all of their planning, so they don't know exactly what their requirements are, but we're trying to offset having to trench 40 kilometres, run a pipe, and then have the authorities doing that again in a year's time or 2 years' time. So I think coordination across this is a real challenge, and getting people to understand that we all need to work to one timeline has been a challenge. Our other key challenge is obviously working with the metro line. We have 3 stations on site underground, and working with the time frame for that and with our time frame for our construction. And I think for us, the solution to the infrastructure challenges in Riyadh and more broadly in KSA is around collaboration. We could not be more lucky to have the amazing support of all the different authorities we work with, whether it be SEC, NWC, or the Royal Commission of Riyadh City, who are playing a critical role coordinating between all the parties. But that spirit of goodwill, the willingness to coordinate and collaborate as one team has driven us to where we are today, and I think will take Riyadh and KSA through this major infrastructure challenge of the future. So I'd like to thank everyone again for the time, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for that. Yeah, thank you very much, Jonathan. Really interesting presentation there, and I think he deserves a virtual round of applause from everyone that is tuning in from around the world. I'm seeing a lot of comments flooding in from the likes of GCC nations. I see people from the US, Mexico, which is fantastic to see. We will be back in just 5 minutes, where we will begin our first panel discussion of the day, analysing the current state of Saudi Arabia's infrastructure sector. We will see you very shortly. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Now we will begin our first panel of the conference by looking at Saudi Arabia's overall infrastructure growth and exploring the major challenges and opportunities currently taking place in the kingdom. I'm delighted to be joined by four key names who will give their perspective and inputs about Saudi Arabia's infrastructure sector. So we are joined by Diriyah Gate Development Authority's Senior Developer Director, Mohamed Saad. We also have ACCIONA Cultural Engineering's Country Manager for KSA, Daniel Orti. We have Depa Interiors Director, Abdoullah Albizreh. And we also have Autodesk's Senior Director for Infrastructure Business Strategy, Theo Agelopoulos. Gents, it's great to have you on the panel and really look forward to an engaging discussion today. Now, just before we begin with our panel, I'd like to give a quick summary about our panelists today. So Mohamed Saad is involved in the $20 billion Diriyah Gate project in Saudi Arabia, where he is leading the Phase 1 master plan development and has been heavily involved in what will become the largest retail district in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Diriyah Square. Theo Agelopoulos leads Autodesk infrastructure business growth and has played a key role in the company's overall business model transformation, specifically in Autodesk's architecture, engineering, and construction business. Daniel Orti has been involved in some of the most high-profile infrastructure projects during his career, including the King Khalid International Airport Terminals 3 and 4 in Riyadh, and has more than 18 years experience in EPC projects. Finally, we are joined by Abdoullah Albizreh, who again has worked on some of the biggest kind of giga projects in the kingdom, as well as key infrastructure projects, including the King Abdullah Financial District Metro in Riyadh. So now we've given the introductions, let's begin with the panel. So Saudi Arabia is going through a sustained period of infrastructure expansion and regeneration as part of the kingdom's ambitions to have a vibrant society and a thriving economy and an ambitious nation, which is part of the three pillars of the Vision 2030 agenda. Now, since the launch of Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 agenda almost 5 years ago, how has the kingdom's infrastructure sector developed during this time? Daniel, perhaps we could come to you first, just for you to give some of your experiences of what you've kind of gone through at ACCIONA.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, sure. It has been a really exciting journey. In the sense, in ACCIONA, we have multiple verticals in the business. I do represent the cultural engineering side of the business. And yeah, basically from our perspective, the infrastructures will enable the social development and cultural development of the country, in the sense that always an infrastructure will serve something. I mean, a power plant will serve something, a desalination plant will serve an asset, and that will create a context, a social context. From ACCIONA, we are a very sustainable company. Actually, not just in the technical sense of being sustainable, also in the social sense of being sustainable. In the infrastructure side, we are already involved in the construction of major water treatment plants and desalination plants on the East Coast. And we are very focused in that side of the business. From cultural engineering business, we want to complete the cycle. All these happenings in the kingdom about infrastructures has been putting a pin on the map where things will happen, and it's also shaping somehow what will be the future of the kingdom in the next years. Actually, it's covered by the Vision 2030. One of the biggest pillars is the question of creating a vibrant society. That's this being built now. This is being built through the infrastructure. And this is the excitement we really find on this. It's like never has been in this scale put together a master plan that will jump a country into the next generation, into the next vision of the country.
Okay. And Abdullah, I'll come to you next. Just kind of same question posed to you. You know, you've obviously worked quite extensively within Saudi Arabia at Depa Interiors. What sort of changes have you seen within the infrastructure sector kind of since the Vision 2030 was launched 5 years ago?
Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, I mean, Saudi Arabia's construction and infrastructure is probably one of the largest in the GCC. We've seen contracts grew from 11.2 billion in 2016 to 14.6 billion in 2018. And transportation definitely being one of the biggest. We've seen airports upgrade expansion and the metro, Riyadh Metro, where we're working on 2 projects. One of them designed by Zaha Hadid, which you mentioned, in KFD, which is an iconic metro station. Hotel development continue to be strong and solid. There's about 4,500 rooms expected to be delivered in 2021. We're working on 3 of them. There's a DoubleTree Hilton and a Hilton, so that continues to be strong. And lastly, cinema development last year was very strong as well. It contributed 1 billion Saudi riyals to the GDP of Saudi Arabia and created more than 1,000 jobs. That was only in 2020.
And Theo, I want to come to you next. You very kindly have stayed up till kind of the early hours of the morning, currently based in the US. Kind of what do you think of those figures then from Abdoullah? And what are you seeing from sort of an outside perspective with Saudi Arabia at the moment?
Yeah, thanks Ashley for having me. I'm happy to be here. I think what's exciting from my perspective, I had the luxury of traveling all over the world and seeing lots of infrastructure, or buildings and infrastructure being developed, built, and ultimately operated. And I think what's exciting about what's happening in Saudi is, one, is the level of commitment from the kingdom to make the appropriate investments. And Jonathan talked, I think, at length about the planning that's going into place. If you think about the level of if you look at the total long-term operating cost of infrastructure assets, 80% is ultimately in the operations and maintenance of the assets. But with all the planning that I see and all the investment that I see, the relative investment that I see, I think the kingdom is really setting itself up to be kind of a lighthouse of not only how you plan, design, build, but ultimately operate critical infrastructure. So I think that vision and that commitment from the kingdom is, in my opinion, a standout around the world.
Okay. And I want to move on to more sort of the areas of demand for infrastructure at the moment in Saudi Arabia. Mohamed, perhaps you could touch upon sort of your experiences at Diriyah Gate. What sort of how are you catering to sort of the demands for infrastructure in the kingdom? What's sort of the key infrastructure projects that you're working on at Diriyah Gate?
Thanks, Ashley, and thanks for my colleagues in the panel. Obviously, there are 3 main sectors where the kingdom is focusing to develop the infrastructure. The first one is obviously transportation. And as we all know, Riyadh is the largest city growing in GCC in terms of population, targeting 15 million residents. But at the moment, there are 10 million motorized passenger journeys in Riyadh every day. And 80% of these journeys are by private cars and only 20% by public transportation. So public transportation, public network will rebalance this modal split. Obviously, there's huge investment done by the government in the metro, $22 billion to deliver 170, 180 kilometers of metro rails. There's also the bus network, which will connect with us also in Diriyah Gate. It's a 1,900 kilometer bus network with 3,000 stops. And we are working hand in hand with RCRC. We'll have 3 metro stations in Diriyah Gate. We will connect with the public bus network as well. If I move to electricity, we have 1,500 megavolt ampere MVAs required for Diriyah Gate. And we signed an agreement with STC to develop a bulk substation and 4 more substations to deliver this power. Water is very important for us. We require 35,000 cubic meters of potable water every day, and 133,000 cubic meters of TSC. And as Jonathan mentioned in the presentation, it's a pretty challenging task to bring water 4 kilometers away from the main source to bring the TSC. So we are collaborating with all the authorities, whether SEC, NWC National Water Company, or the Royal Commission for Riyadh City, to make sure that we deliver an efficient infrastructure to our projects and all the other giga projects surrounding us.
Yeah, okay. And Abdullah, you mentioned just then that you kind of work extensively on the King Abdullah Financial District Metro in Riyadh at Depa. So do you think it's the sort of rail segment of infrastructure that's seeing the most demand at the minute? Is there anything sort of you're noticing apart from rail? Abdullah,
yeah, thanks, Ashley. In terms of transportation, at the moment, it's Metro, due to Riyadh Metro being a really large project or infrastructure project. We are seeing inquiries come for airports, especially also there's an idea of privatization of the airports, and that would probably need new design and new fit outs. That's in terms of the transportation. In terms of buildings, hotels still are very, very strong in terms of developments. And that was in the past, and it's going to be even more with all the PIF subsidiaries developing large projects. So we're in talk with them. We see the plans that are coming up, and that will probably be one of the biggest, definitely.
Okay. And I'll come to Daniel next. Obviously, you mentioned there about the airport demand in Saudi Arabia. We're seeing a lot of giga projects like the Red Sea Development Company kind of showing us their renders of the airport that's dedicated for that site. Daniel, you've obviously worked on the King Khalid International Airport, Terminals 3 and 4. What's kind of the scope for Saudi Arabia at the minute in terms of having more airports and things like that? And how do you think it's going to be delivered for the likes of these giga projects like the Red Sea Development Company?
In my opinion, I had certain experience in aviation and in King Khalid. The first approach to reshape, it was about 6 years ago, reshaping King Khalid International Airport was part of this ambition was at that time of reshaping Saudi Arabia, in the sense that there was an intention by the local authorities to create the end-to-end journey. So I particularly remember when we were shaping up the design for King Khalid International Airport at that time, there was like all the intent to convey the Wadi experience, the local welcoming from Saudi people to the visitor. So it was kind of like happening at that time, and it was a while ago, before Vision 2030. This needs to follow, and actually is following. As I said, all the airports are being planned, are connected to future development areas, rather it's for hospitality, rather it's cultural developments, or any kind of other experience for the Saudi citizens or for visitors. That I think personally will drive the delivery of the airports. We've seen all these amazing projects in the West Coast, in Red Sea, which are by signature architects and are very iconic structures. And for me, that's the welcoming in the end-to-end journey. If I'm coming as a visitor to Saudi Arabia, the first place I will land, it's in an airport. And I will start my journey in Saudi Arabia. So I think it will be a key factor in all this new vision for the country about how things are shaping up and how that delivery will happen. Obviously, it was mentioned before by Abdullah. It's like now it's a question of like also reshaping the economy, moving to government operators to private operators, moving to a more international terminals will receive more international visitors. So yeah, all this needs to be put in context. But that's honestly the airports. I truly believe it's a key point in the end-to-end journey in the visitor experience. It's the gate to the country, basically.
And Theo, I'll come to you next. What do you think about the comments so far in terms of the demand for particular infrastructure projects in the minute? What do you think? Do you agree with them? Do you think there's something else that sort of Saudi Arabia could tap in terms of like other infrastructure projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm hearing and what I see certainly in Saudi Arabia is pretty consistent with what we see around the world, quite frankly. And I think it's not just the asset types. I think it's ultimately about how we deliver these projects. I think, Saudi Arabia, if I look at the digital journey that we've been going through in our industry for the last 10 or 15 years, building information modeling has kind of transformed the way that a lot of these projects are being delivered. And a lot of my peers and companies are basically helping, the kingdom, make that transition. So I think Saudi in particular is at this kind of great juncture where there's not only the investment in a lot of the infrastructure, but the way that they're delivering and implementing this infrastructure is transformative, and it's going digital and staying digital all the way through the assets life cycle. So aside from just the asset types of airports and rail and buildings, now we're seeing kind of, a city is really a collection of different asset types, and being able to put those different asset types together and deliver them in an efficient and productive way is kind of the basis for ultimately getting to a smart city. So, in my opinion, I actually think what the kingdom's doing is on this accelerated journey in what we've seen in the past in other markets where it's taken decades. I think Saudi's at this critical juncture where they're doing it in a very short time frame. So it's a very exciting time, I think, in the region, and I think definitely KSA is going to be a leader and is a leader in doing that. Okay.
Yeah, it's very exciting times at the moment. And while there's many opportunities for infrastructure projects in Saudi, I want to delve into a little bit more about the challenges that each of you have faced at your respective companies and how you've overcome them. Mohamed, perhaps you could start off with kind of what sort of the main challenges that you've particularly faced at Diriyah Gate?
Well, obviously, Ashley, it's the program pressure and the time scales that our senior stakeholders and board members are expecting us to deliver on. So within these pressures, we need also to coordinate with other authorities and giga projects. As we mentioned, we are talking about bulk infrastructure here, whether the power 1,500 MVAs or water 35,000 cubic meters or KSE, and the metro as well, coordinating 3 metro stations on 2 metro lines is a challenging mandate. And our response is we are proactively engaging with all the authorities. We are very lucky with the response we are getting from them, very collaborative attitude from everyone. We are actually putting our CapEx approvals in advance with our board members to ensure that we have enough funds to do our tasks in 2021 and forward. This year alone, we have 4 billion SAR of infrastructure packages in Wadi Safar and 13 billion SAR infrastructure budget for Diriyah Gate. We are awarding circa 21 infra packages this year alone. So it's proactive management, collaboration with all the authorities, resolving issues in a collaborative manner with everyone for the benefit of the kingdom.
Wow, some very big figures there. Abdoullah, what sort of the challenges that you face, particularly with the metro projects you've worked on in Saudi? And I know you've obviously worked with a couple of the giga projects within the kingdom. What's some of the experiences that you can share?
Sure. So I came to Dubai. I'll just give you a little bit of an overview. I came to Dubai in 2006. At that time, Dubai was developing Burj Dubai at that time, which is now Burj Khalifa, which was successfully delivered, and Nakheel Harbour and Tower, which was supposed to be a 1 kilometer tower, supposed to be even higher. One project was successfully delivered. The other one is still just a metro station name with obviously a big hole in the middle of the desert. And I guess the main reason is funding. That's what I believe. You can also obviously discuss the demand and other reasons. I'm sure there's other factors, but funding is definitely one of the major reasons. It's in 2020. It's now the payments are being delayed 108 days more than it was 18 months ago. So that's almost about 4 months, which is obviously pressurizes the whole supply chain to deliver. So I think that is the major. This is obviously not related to the projects that we're doing in Saudi. This is more of a kind of a general overview of the industry. And I've seen the projects that we're doing on, let's say, KFD, which is designed by Zaha, is a very complex engineering and requires extremely sophisticated BIM and designers to actually take that BIM model and develop it into shop drawings. and hand it to site, and then even have precise cut sheeting, because every panel is custom made. There's not one that looks the other, and there's double curvature. So it's extremely complex, but the delays have not been as much as another project, which is completely typical just because it had the better funding, I believe.
Okay. I'd like to come to Daniel next on that. It's quite interesting about the delays point there, Abdullah. Daniel, have you kind of experienced the same kind of things there as Abdullah?
Honestly, frankly speaking, we come from a complicated season. Obviously, the whole world has suffering a pandemic, and that affected, I guess, everyone in different levels around the world. But at the same time, we come from a company with a very strong digital culture, and we make a lot of effort internally in the group for innovation, for research development, and also for technological transfer. I mean, what we develop in the sense of innovation, we want to deliver it to the business. So this digital transformation honestly helped very much in order not to have substantial delays in the latest times, and also matches very well the world is being shaped nowadays, in the sense like, seems everything will move to digital, the digital experience will be there. We will need also, even for the project delivery, as was mentioned before, the BIM, the BIM, the building modeling is growing very fast for the design stage, it's growing extremely fast even for operations and maintenance, is being everywhere. And we truly believe we are very ready for that. Actually, we've been kind of pulling some of our subcontractors, some of our clients to move to this new digital era. That helps. I mean, obviously, these giga projects has enormous budgets, and sometimes has multiple decision makers involved on the process. But all the tools that we can incorporate, we can digitally incorporate to the process, that will expedite and that will support the projects.
Okay. And I want to elaborate a little bit more about, you mentioned there about the BIM models, and I think Theo did earlier as well. Obviously, over the past 12 months, we have entered into a more digitally driven world, which has been accelerated from the COVID-19 pandemic. Theo, I'll come back to you on this. How do you think technology is going to influence the development of infrastructure in Saudi Arabia kind of going forward?
Yeah, so I mean, I can tell you, I mean, even pre-COVID, I think we're on this digital journey, right? And I think what happened with COVID, it really just accelerated, everyone's kind of, mission to get there faster. So I can tell you what we saw. Saudi has been one of the fastest growing regions for Autodesk, right? And we don't design or build. It's really the people on this panel and our customers that use our technology in order to do that, right? So we've been an enabler in their digital journey, and what we've seen in the region and in Saudi in particular is kind of this acceleration of adoption of digital technology and even cloud technology, right? So I think as we think about building information modeling, which is really just a better process for delivering these projects, and ultimately going digital and remaining digital all the way through the asset lifecycle. I think the biggest impact of COVID has been, like I said, the acceleration of that digital journey. And I'd say, just to go back to one of your other questions, is I think in order to it takes a lot of commitment from the kingdom to push their supply chain to move in that direction. And one of the biggest challenges is, how do you get the whole supply chain upskilled and capable to support, especially the larger companies like ACCIONA, for example, that Daniel was talking about, and how do you make that whole, supply chain capable and efficient, right? So I think that's where we are today. And certainly I know from an Autodesk perspective, we spend a lot of our time trying to help that long tail, to accelerate that digital journey. So that's kind of at least what we've seen. Okay.
And Abdullah, have you noticed sort of the same thing that Theo mentioned there? The challenge of upskilling sort of the supply chain. What's some of the things that you've noticed particularly? How have you had to adapt with infrastructure projects that Depa has worked on?
So from a supply chain, because we deliver most of the packages internally, so there's not much of a factor there. With our subcontractors, it's really training about health and safety. That was basically the main challenges. The shop drawings are all done in-house, especially with BIM, and then most of the packages are delivered in-house. The few subcontractors that do not really need BIM, because we do it for them, and then it's actually sent to the factories with the cut sheets to deliver the material on site. So it's more been health and safety rather than the technology in the kingdom.
And Mohamed, same to you. Kind of, do you agree with the other gents there? Do you think that is this sort of the same things that you're experiencing at Diriyah Gate?
Sure. Actually, no doubt that COVID-19 influenced the way we do business, and it became more evident that investing in the digital infrastructure for companies and countries is not a luxury but must. And I think that strong and capable digital infrastructure will become a point of differentiation and advantage to have a robust economy. Saudi has been amazing investing in digital infrastructure. We're enjoying one of the highest speeds of internet in the world. And this has paid back to ensure that we didn't really have major disruptions in business in 2020. So I believe strongly that Saudi has a great potential in the digital transformation, not only in GCC, but globally, I think.
And Theo, you mentioned earlier about smart city infrastructure. What's the scope, do you think, for smart cities in Saudi Arabia in the minute? What do you think are some of the opportunities there?
Yeah, I mean, smart cities is an interesting word, right? Because I think it means something different to different. It means something different to different people. You know, is it smart? Is it smart lamppost, or is it smart roads or smart bridges? I think the opportunity that Saudi has is that because they're actually delivering a lot of new infrastructure and they're digital from the beginning, they're basically preparing themselves to assemble a lot of these digital assets or these digital representations of the physical world in a way that they can ultimately have and ultimately run a smart city. And certainly my definition of a smart city is it's a collection of different assets that have to interact with each other to provide real-time information to help the city make better decisions for the future, right? So, and a lot of that, there's a lot of different technologies and a lot of different processes that really have to come together to make that happen. So, to give an example, one of the things that certainly we did was, collaborate with Esri, which is the leader in GIS, because what we saw was that, to develop a smart city really required the ability to bring, building information modeling and geospatial data together in a way that allowed cities to operate more efficiently, right? So I think with what's going on in Saudi, they are, in my opinion, in the best position to really develop and deliver a smart city compared to a lot of older cities where you see they're having to kind of just capture the physical, world in a digital way, right? So I think what I would say, what I'm going to predict in the next 5 years is that the kingdom is going to be at the front end of that emerging smart city opportunity.
Wow. Okay, that's a very big statement, Theo. Do you agree with that, Daniel? Do you think that the kingdom is going to be at the forefront in the next sort of 5 years or so?
Absolutely, 100% agree with that statement. Because as I was saying, the infrastructure that being put in place, all the kingdom is enabling, and particularly this will by the ruler of this country and by the government of this country to put all that available to the society and to the visitors to the country. What it makes me, and from our perspective, as mentioned before, I represent the cultural engineering side of the company. What is we always think, in the question Theo was mentioning about how we differently interpret the question of a smart city, it's pretty interesting, I guess. So like traditionally, you always go to the high-tech technology, to the very ultimate technological solution, and I love the definition that Theo gave to the it's a group of us gave that it's a group of assets that interact together to put together a smart solution for the city. But going beyond, and from our perspective as creating social and cultural structures, it needs to serve the user experience. I mean, the average user, this is the question, like in IT, we call the back end and the front end. Obviously, there's all the technological condition is happening in the country, in the back end, to enable all this experience. Now, companies like us is when we jump into the scene. We need to wrap this in a user-friendly environment, to put it in a container and to project it to the user. I mean, the user won't see the back end. The user will only see the front end. And this is the amazing thing. Again, I mentioned it before, in the scale that is happening in the keynote of Saudi Arabia. In the 60s, Brasilia put together a full city that was kind of like a smart city for its time, and is particularly planned in a particular way. And now in Cairo, in Egypt, is happening, like the new capital is also like planning a city in a particular way to serve a certain socio-cultural environment. In the scale is happening in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, it's amazing and overwhelming. I mean, I love it, because it's like, we are not creating a city, we are not creating a neighborhood, we are almost shaping a full country. If we go, it's interesting, we don't talk even anymore about mega projects, we talk about giga projects. And it's like, when we see all these and all this happening at the same time, the possibilities are incredible. But again, from our perspective, the shape we will give to this, the user experience we will put onto this, will make the difference. You know, and that's where companies, as I said, like, you know, the user experience, media, how this can serve different generations. Just an example, in this project, probably in our organizations, we have 4 generations working in the project. We have the boomers, we have the Generation X, we have millennials, and the centennials will be using all that. How do we wrap up all that and we put it together for the benefit of the community, rather the Saudi citizens and the visitors to the country? That's really interesting for us, and that's our business.
Okay, Theo, I want to come to you next. Just from a sort of outside perspective, you're currently based in the US. I'd like to know kind of what attention Saudi Arabia is generating at the moment in terms of infrastructure development. What do you think the region and other countries around the world can learn from Saudi Arabia in terms of infrastructure development?
Yeah, so I mean, I think from an outside looking in, what we see, what people see, and what other countries see is this. One is the commitment and the vision that I think Jonathan talked about earlier, which is this, you know, the whole planning for the next, you know, decade, and the scale of projects and the sophistication of those projects is an investment. I think we talk about, and many of you probably read the, you know, McKinsey's report of $1 trillion infrastructure gap, you know, that's around the world. And if you look at that gap, you know, the majority of that gap is actually in North America. So we're seeing not just the talking, but the commitment and investment happening in the region. Number two, we're seeing, you know, and I think Abdoullah talked about some of the projects, you know, in UAE as well as in Saudi, where the adoption of digital technology and transformative delivery processes on some of these projects. And we see, you know, I think you mentioned, Ashley, you know, the Red Sea Development Company and the Red Sea Project. And so, you know, they are kind of lighthouse and very innovative and forward-thinking projects that I think other countries around the world are looking to emulate, right? So I think the luxury that the kingdom's had, because of their vision, their investment, and their commitment into, you know, going digital, they're becoming kind of like similar to what we see in Singapore in Asia. You know, I would say, you know, Saudi is becoming that same kind of visionary market around the delivery of these infrastructure projects. So yeah, I think that's why I made that bold prediction earlier, was because of all these factors together. It's not just one thing.
Yeah. Okay. I'm a little bit conscious about time because we've got a few minutes left. So I'll come to the final question, which I'd like to get an input from each of you here, is how do you think the role of infrastructure development will lead to ultimately better living communities and a higher standard of life for Saudi nationals and visitors? Abdoullah, we'll start with you on this.
Sure, thanks, Ashley. I guess we could look at some of the good examples of the Olympic Games, because it has a huge infrastructure development in these cities, and how the areas that had this huge infrastructure investment redeveloped especially the undeveloped areas and enhanced the real estate built environment. Barcelona 92 is a very good example. It also not only developed the undeveloped areas, it also increased tourism by 6 million in 14 years. That's a 25% increase per year. Burj Khalifa, which was a small development, but still, it put Dubai on the tourism map and kind of helped Dubai diversify from the oil industry. And then if we look at Dubai Metro has returned 1.6 dirhams for each dirham spent only by 2016, and it's supposed to be increased to 4.3 dirhams by 2030. So that's a huge return on investment, not to mention the ease of congestion and save time of transport, reduce carbon emission, which obviously is better for the environment, decreasing traffic accidents, which is better for the health and safety of the residents, and obviously the appreciation of properties in those areas. So definitely there is a huge impact and potential.
Okay. And Mohamed, I'll come to you for this. How is Diriyah going to put Saudi Arabia kind of on the map? What's sort of the objectives for you at the business?
Well, Diriyah, as Jonathan explained in his presentation, is very unique development. And the vision of His Royal Highness the Crown Prince is, I don't think there's any other giga project or any project actually in the world following this vision. We are trying to create a mud city that looks like the 300 years old Utreif, the UNESCO listed World Heritage Site, but supported with all the modern 21st century amenities and facilities, whether it's transport or smart cities, as my colleagues explained. It's all human-centric. It's focusing on sustainable infrastructure to improve the quality of life of our residents, tenants, and end users in general. So I think Diriyah will be the talk of Saudi, GCC, and probably the world for the next few years when it's built and people can come and enjoy this experience that doesn't look like any other giga project in the kingdom or in the region.
Okay. And some final thoughts from you, Daniel. Where do you think Saudi Arabia is heading in terms of infrastructure development? How is it going to improve Saudi nationals and visitors' kind of experience there?
As I mentioned before, the infrastructures enable for something. I mean, and something is the social development of the community. And we've seen this before in many of our projects. I'm very lucky working on the cultural engineering side of the company. We've been involved in Qatar National Museum, and that reshaped the city. Not just because of the interest of the visitor visiting Qatar National Museum, also because in the community it creates such amount of activation, such amount of interaction in the community that actually activates the community and creates a cultural hub. Happened the same in the project we did in Kuwait for the park with 2 also cultural museums. It's happening in Cairo. We are heavily involved in Expo Dubai 2020, and we just opened in January the first pavilion in Expo, which is a sustainability pavilion, which is trying to, through a very sustainable message, to make a footprint in the visitor. So all these things, we've seen it in a smaller scale before. Obviously, as I said, the infrastructure will enable a social context where things will happen. And this is the beauty again. And when we come to the question of the scale and the different approaches, we have in Diriyah, we have a extremely cultural heritage place, which is come from a Saudi tradition, Saudi architectural tradition. They will have more leisure projects. In example, Diriyah will be more amusement park and motorsport. Then it comes the hospitality side in the Red Sea projects and Amala in the West Coast. So at the end of the day, all these giga projects, all these infrastructures, the power plants, the airports will serve a purpose, will be the social development of Saudi Arabia and being the gate and the showcase to the world. Like as Abdoullah was mentioning before, these projects he mentioned, like Burj Khalifa in example in Dubai, or as I said, Qatar National Museum in Doha or the Louvre in Abu Dhabi, completely change completely the way the tourist, the visitor, and even the citizen is approaching the city. And this is the beauty of the giga projects in Saudi Arabia. Now we see a lot of numbers. We see like massive investments, billions of US dollars, trillions of US dollars, but the outcome of that, the conversion of that into the social structure of Saudi Arabia, I think that would be like incredible in the following years.
Okay. Final thoughts from you, Theo, before we conclude the panel.
Yeah, I mean, I think my fellow panelists and Jonathan, did a really nice job of kind of saying what I was going to say. But what I would say in closing is, it's amazing to me, in my 25 years in the industry, that 25 years ago we were talking about, how many people are you going to move on a train, or how many cars are you going to push through, on a road, and now we're talking about community, sustainability, quality, and I think we're talking, the key outcomes we're looking for is really about delivering a better world, right? So I think that's what my key takeaway is when I listen to my fellow panelists and Jonathan. It's not just delivering these projects and putting them in place, right? It's about how do we change the way they're delivered and ultimately the outcome they provide to our communities and to citizens. So I think that's the fact that we're having those types of conversations shows how transformative the infrastructure has become over the last 20 years.
Okay. We've got probably time just for one or two Q&A questions. So there's a question here from Abdoullah Sinan, who wants to ask the question to Mohamed Saad about whether Diriyah Gate Development Authority is using the likes of cloud-based design for collaboration technology. Is that something that you're able to answer, Mohamed?
Yeah, sure. We work with our consultants on all the technological platforms that we can use, whether it's document control or cloud-based design systems. So yes, this is happening. We're collaborating with big firms in the industry. So this is already happening between our consultants and us as well.
Okay, brilliant. That is all we have time for the first panel. Thank you very much, Mohamed, Theo, Abdullah and Daniel for taking part today. Hopefully you can stay with us for our next panel, which will be on building an integrated public transport system, which will be coming up very shortly. See you in a moment.
Well, there are several ways in which a course like this might contribute. I mean, the first one is about upskilling. You know, if somebody wants to progress, often they need that academic qualification to progress in their own profession. There's also the professional qualification that, as an RICS accredited program, it leads to that professional recognition. And certainly what we are finding is that clients in periods of uncertainty in particular want that stamp of approval, that guarantee of quality, that mark of professionalism. And certainly we have students inquiring with us who are saying, look, you know, I've got tons of experience, but, you know, I need that academic and professional qualification to kind of hit the button with the international clients who are looking for that consistent standard.
And I think because the course covers quite like a wide range of topics, it actually helps you identify what you want to do, like which sort of pathway you want to go down, whether like Elizabeth is currently doing investment, myself, I do asset management. So you kind of get a taste of each, and then you can kind of decide from there.
Studying real estate whilst in the industry is probably one of my greatest achievements. It's not easy studying and working at the same time. It brings your skill set, industry knowledge and academia together. You know, the masters actually complements my day job quite well. They cover modules such as property valuation, investment finance, which goes into the deeper theory of what we do and how we do it. And the masters also teaches other modules that basically view every aspect of real estate and all corners of the industry, which is really good.
So at the moment, the changes seem to just be quite short term. So like my office, we've got glass screens, we limit contact where possible. But I think it'll be interesting to think about the lasting changes. So the days of kind of going into the office to kind of do work, I think will be gone. I think we'll go in for a specific purpose, so client meetings or collaboration, and landlords will have to think about what will need to change in order to meet these changes in the way we use them.
I think we need to sell ourselves, which is, it's not just about bricks and mortar and buildings and all the rest of it. It's far, far bigger than that. And the responsibility we have through the built environment all around the world to make change is enormous over, you know, the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years plus.
I think in terms of minimizing risk, one of the biggest challenges is trying to reduce void periods in portfolios, especially in the office market at the minute. As Hattie touched on, that there's this movement to a work from home model, which seems to be quite favourable at the minute and doesn't seem to be going away, seems to be getting stronger every day.
welcome back once again. Hope everyone has found the conference informative so far. Now, to conclude day one of the conference, we are going to be delving into the public transport sector in Saudi Arabia to discuss a range of topics. So joining us for this panel will be Fenwick Elliott's lead partner for Saudi Arabia, Toby Randall, SNC Lavalin Atkins Acquietes Senior Director Roger Cruikshank, and Sistra's Project Director Alexander Jonard. So Toby, Roger and Alexander, it's great to have you on the panel today. Hope you're enjoying the conference so far. Now, as I did with the first panel, I just want to give our audience a quick summary about our panelists today before we get things going. So Toby has over 25 years experience in construction, energy and civil engineering disputes, and has been recognized as a leader in the field of international arbitration. He's represented clients in the likes of the UAE, Saudi Arabia, China, Europe and the US, and further beyond that. Toby has been actively involved in arbitrations related to the Riyadh Metro. Roger brings over 30 years experience in transport and infrastructure projects and has a key experience in the public transport and aviation sectors, the rail transport and ports. More recently, he's also been provided support to the Atkins Acquietes global initiatives, notably for the future of transport. Alexander Jonard has also been heavily involved with the Riyadh Metro, where he is currently the project director. He has been with Sistra for 20 years, delivering many challenging projects around the world, including India, Pakistan, China, South Korea, before arriving in KSA in 2012. Now I've finished the introductions. Let's begin with our final discussion of the day. So Toby, Roger and Alexander, hope I haven't made you all feel too old by those numbers of experience. But obviously travel has been one of the major sectors coming to a standstill in 2020. And even in 2021 as well, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So first of all, I'd like to know, we'll come to Alexander first. What do you think are the most dominant options for travel in the kingdom, and how is Saudi Arabia diversifying its transport sector at the moment?
Currently, I would say, first, I would like to add that I'm present in Saudi Arabia for nearly 9 years now. Actually, I observe a very big transformation. So, of course, and I kind of want to rebound of what you were saying in the previous panel. I see a big change in Saudi Arabia, and actually the transportation is one of them. Previously, I would say Saudi Arabia was focusing mainly on the air transport, and I think there are the people here who can address the question most probably better than I. But on the other side, what we see, and especially for Sistra, you may know that Sistra is specialized mainly in railway transportation, whether they are urban transportation or outside city transportation, and we address all the system of rail transport, freight, metro, and passenger transport. And what we are observing now, and especially with new major project coming, the Riyadh Metro is only one of them, we see that actually Saudi Arabia is investing a lot in transportation and railway, not only for the city, but also between the different cities. There's been already big projects ongoing. One of them is actually a north-south line going from South Saudi Arabia to the north, more than 1,000 kilometers of rail freight. And actually, Sistra is also currently involved in projects, and one of them is called the Land Bridge project, on which actually we are building, not building yet, actually still in design, but there is a project of connecting all the GCC countries, and actually we are actively working on that and preparing the design. So I would say it was originally more air transport, and I think we are going more and more in the railway and the infrastructure on rail. Sure.
Okay, Roger, would you agree there with Alexander? Do you think we're kind of more going towards rail infrastructure at the moment? I know the previous panelists talked actually a lot about rail as well. So what sort of, do you agree kind of with those statements?
I mean, obviously, I think there has been that revolution. I mean, it started obviously with Dammam to Riyadh, and then, as Alexander said, you know, from Riyadh to the northern Saudi Arabia with the SAR line, and now there was a focus on certainly Riyadh and Jeddah, with obviously Jeddah on the back burner at the moment, but Riyadh, you know, moving forward with the metro. So yes, I think the government has had ambitions to see the population grow. Urban mobility, if left just to the car, will obviously stagnate movement, and so you know, public transport is clearly hugely important. I mean, it's very interesting. I was in Sweden 18 months ago at the UITP International Conference, and the conference was actually sponsored by Riyadh Metro to illustrate the ambition of building 180 kilometers at the same time, which is unheard of, you know, in the rest of the world, really, around such a large scale project. But if you're going to double your population over the next couple of decades, you need that backbone of infrastructure. So rail has to be able to compete and be able to provide the spread for people rather than using their car as a means of transport.
Okay. And Toby, how do you think Saudi Arabia is diversifying its transport sector at the moment? What are some of the changes that you're seeing, particularly with transport at the moment?
Well, thanks, Ashley. Just first of all, thank you very much for this opportunity to be part of this panel. You know, and Construction Week continues to be a brilliant publication, and well done on all that, Ashley. It's great, and it's nice to see it's nice to be amongst such esteemed company today. So in terms of the infrastructure, you know, the incredible diversification. I suppose there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in terms of the infrastructure that has been in existence in the past in terms of improvements. And, you know, the 80-20 that people have discussed about the car versus public transport system, clearly, as things develop in the incredible way that they are at the moment, that shift will move. And that shift is obviously, we've heard a lot about rail and the metro, but there are all sorts of, you know, other much more, an interesting one, and this is more based on renewables than anything else, but just on a minor level, I was interested to see the green bike scheme being proposed in pedestrianised areas. And this implementation is ongoing. It's ongoing apace, and it's going to, with the blank canvas that a lot of these projects have had to begin with. There's such an incredible opportunity, and it's all extremely exciting. And at Fenwick Elliott, we're delighted to be involved on many elements of it. You did mention that a lot of my experience and expertise was in disputes and arbitration, but I would say that's a part of it. But part of what we're doing a lot of in the Kingdom in relation to these infrastructure projects is assisting the multiple stakeholders to collaborate with each other during the progress and during the progress of projects to assist delivery and to avoid those ultimate positions if possible. And that's the theme that I'm sure we'll come on to. We've heard that word collaboration and commitment mentioned a lot today already, and I would endorse that. And those are the keys to developing the infrastructure system going forward, as I see it.
Yeah, definitely agree with you, Toby. The collaboration does seem to be the key theme at the minute. And yeah, thank you very much for your kind words as well at the start. I want to move on to more sort of the cost implications now. I mentioned earlier that obviously there's been huge disruptions in travel, not just in Saudi Arabia, but globally. And I'd like to know how has this impacted investments into building a huge pipeline of transport projects in the Kingdom? Have you noticed whether sort of government agencies are looking at private sector investment to support the upcoming transport projects? Roger, what have you kind of heard on this?
Yeah, so that's a definite key aspect, really, the vision, and I think it's really been stated by PIF and many others recently that their expectations to see this infrastructure investment in the country will in many ways be played by how the private sector contributes to that in whichever manner, whether it's to do with just the physical construction or more importantly in the operations and asset management. So we are involved in a number of projects in the transport field and indeed as well as the water sector, where we are supporting government at whatever stage that they are in, whether it's the notion of wanting to hand over assets already built for a purpose of operation, or more importantly where I'm at the moment, whereas we're helping one government agency around setting policy and actually the frameworks in order to invite the private sector to then bid or participate in the physical construction of projects. Now, there's also a social impact that's got to be looked at. So part of the business case is not just looking at the returns that would be seen by the private sector, but also what the public sector and or the citizen will actually get from this, because there are a number of key changes that have clearly happened with citizens around sort of taxations or certain other levies. And obviously, if there are increases in costs around, say, a tolling or some other access charge, then that will obviously limit some of the growth and ability. So the government will clearly need to balance between the need to see that growth happen in order to invite visitors and elsewhere to the country, but at the same time, we need to look at that. So that's certainly there's key energy around PPP programs at the moment in the transport sector.
Yeah, okay. And Alexander, do you agree there with Roger? Do you think there is sort of key changes that are being made in terms of private sector investment?
Actually, I think it's even very tangible. I fully agree with what Roger said there. Sistra is involved in urban transportation in the kingdom for more than 15 years here. Actually, we have been involved on some of the project, and mainly before working on the Riyadh Metro, we were mainly working on the West Coast, Mecca, Jeddah, Medina. And actually, what we have noticed there on the project we were working and where we were involved, we have noticed a shift. We have noticed a shift of full public finance to the shift of private investment. And actually, it's even interesting because we were working specifically on same project, but same project with full public investment, and we had to redo and readapt the project for the private investment. So this is a work ongoing, actually, and the change is really important at this stage.
Okay. And Toby, what have you kind of experienced from a sort of law perspective in terms of these private sector investments?
I think the most sort of striking thing from my perspective is just to put what's happened in the last year into context in terms of the funding of these mega projects. We've had two huge and hugely significant events. Obviously, the global pandemic. And secondly, we've had crude prices at incredibly low levels, based upon given those two huge economic shocks that have hit the global economy, and particularly the kingdom in one way or another, it is remarkable that the PIF is still and entirely understandable, still completely committed to the mega projects. They are progressing, they are continuing. And the momentum that all of these projects is still managing to maintain. Okay, there have been some bumps in the road here and there. Everyone recognises that. That's understandable and avoidable. But my own view, in terms of how has the kingdom managed to overcome the standstill that the world has happened? Actually, in a lot of projects, there hasn't been a standstill. There's been remarkable progress that's been going on throughout the last 12 months, and much better progress, I must say, from my experience globally in the kingdom on some of these projects than elsewhere. And so I think everyone should, all the stakeholders should be, congratulate themselves on maintaining the momentum, and long may that continue.
Very well said. Okay, and I want to talk a little bit more about sort of certain transport projects that are going on. Obviously, we have some of our panelists here involved with the Riyadh Metro, but then there's also other transport projects coming up that have been launched recently, one being the line at NEOM. So I'll come to Roger on this. What are the transport projects that you are most excited about at the moment, and how do you think they can contribute towards Saudi Arabia's growth as a nation?
Well, I think as Theo mentioned in the last panel, I mean, Saudi is going to really break ground in so many different sort of areas over the next sort of decade in a number of sectors and streams. But, interestingly, obviously, NEOM is going to be a key kind of showcase of what is the art of the possible, where I think it's going to bring together extremely clever and innovative people to consider how we might evolve and develop a city primarily not around the car but around people basically and the community to be created. Yes, connected perhaps by some high-speed link and allowing some activity between communities, but within the community itself. And this is also that whole agenda, as Toby made the point, really been impacted by this last sort of 18 months around the pandemic, and so much as people are talking about these 15 and 20-minute cities, and the fact that in general, as we have lived at home most recently during this time, we've turned to the local community for the things that we needed to do, whether it's been local shopping, local exercise, and maybe getting to know our neighbours like we'd not done before. So this was happening. There's been a reset that's happened, and therefore Saudi has that great opportunity not to sort of dwell or have elements of that legacy brought to bear. And equally, it was made the point in Diriyah Gate, the idea of the sort of subterranean activity, because look, so many of our cities, like Los Angeles or whatever, the fact is it's just a swathe of concrete. And of course, we're starting to think about, well, what is the promise of the car beyond, say, 2040, 2045, as fossil fuels and the wave towards electrification means that do we actually need roads anymore, or in the way that we see in a form? So Saudi certainly is at that pivotal point where it can sort of not think too much about legacy, but think more importantly about what we are going to be like, not just in the next 10, 15, or even 20 years, but in the next 100 years.
Yeah. And Alexander, what about you? What's the project that's that you're most excited about at the moment? Like, you can be biased, maybe unbiased about the Riyadh Metro. What do you think about that?
No, I think the discussion of today is to see the future, and at that level, I think the Riyadh Metro is already part of the past for us. I'm not saying it's finished, and I'm not saying it's complete, but I think it's important to see what's coming. And I think the one coming, and you were mentioning NEOM, and I think I agree with Roger and what was mentioned in the previous panel as well. I mean, NEOM, as Saudi Arabia it's actually an extraordinary field for innovation. And it's true, we will have in the opportunity of NEOM to study new means of transportation, and I'm focusing mainly on transportation. Of course, we speak a lot about the human, but when we work in the public transport, we always think about the human. I mean, I'm always saying to the people, actually, I'm not transporting NATO trains or I'm transporting passengers. I mean, what is important is not the train, is the people who are inside. So I think here it's clear that Saudi Arabia offers a lot of diversity and possibilities for innovation. NEOM is one of them. I wouldn't say that it is the only one. I personally believe that all the links between the cities and the attractors that Saudi Arabia are currently building are actually very important. We need to realize that, for instance, Riyadh Neom, it's around 1,000 kilometers. Imagine that with a high-speed train. It's making the city in the suburb. I exaggerate a little bit, of course, but it means that they are immediately connected. So I think here there is a lot to do in terms of connecting the cities and the attractors. Also, and I want to come back also a little bit on the pandemic and so on. Of course, Saudi Arabia was affected, but one of the elements I noticed as well, and I think it's also created a need for internal transportation. We have noticed, and I'm one of them. Actually, I didn't leave the country for more than a year now. Which is very unusual for somebody who's not Saudi and living in the country. And actually, I started to enjoy what I can do in this country. I started to visit the country, being a tourist. And I've noticed that many people are currently doing the same. Today, 90% of my team, and I have a huge team here on the Riyadh Metro, they are taking their holidays here in Saudi, not only for the traditional trip to Mecca or Medina, but also to discover the country. And I think there will be a big need for those intercity links, inter-attractor links. I'd like to go to the beach. Today, why I don't go to the beach? Because I have difficulties to find planes and it's becoming an issue. It would be way easier if I can use a train. Of course, I can use the road. The road is very efficient, but it's more tiring. So I think here, I'm really excited to see that coming. I would like to see those railway connections so that I can travel more in the city.
Excellent, excellent. I spoke previously at the other panel about sort of the complexities of these infrastructure projects that are taking place. And I want to focus on sort of the complexities of transport infrastructure in particular. So Toby, how achievable do you think it is to pull off sort of these broad scope of infrastructure projects in Saudi Arabia, and what do you think is going to be some of the challenges to implement this?
Well, there's a question. I suppose the when delivery, just very, very high level, when you're looking at delivery, something like that. I often sort of refer to the 4 C's, if you like, in terms of delivering on a construction project. I mentioned 2 of them, but collaboration, commitment, cash flow, and continuity. And I think all 4 of those elements are essential in their own different ways in order to assist to delivering these projects. But I wanted to, the 2 most important of those, cash flow is obviously very important. It goes without saying, and there's been a lot spoken about the slowdown in cash flow during the last 12 months, etc. But I'm confident that's well on the way to improving and will continue to do so. I just wanted to focus more on the collaboration and the commitment side. Because clearly there is a commitment. There's no doubt about that from the highest level in the kingdom to deliver these projects, and that's being seen, and that's important for the confidence. There's another C there that could be 5, couldn't it? But the collaboration, I think, is the most fundamental building block. When you start with it was mentioned previously about the plan, design, build, and operate phases, and the 5 sort of stakeholders: the funder, owner, designer, contractor, subcontractor, and there's a 6th one, the supply chain. There must be, and continue to be, and this is a global problem, better collaboration between all those parties at every stage. The best way for these projects to be delivered is in my view to continue to improve that collaboration level at all levels, to maintain transparency between the parties about the challenges they face and deal with them. And this is where we find we can add most value as lawyers, getting involved right as necessary during the construction of the project, not to get involved with disputes or generate disputes, but quite the opposite, to assist the parties to collaborate together, to identify what the problems are early, identify solutions, recognize the challenges, recognize that sometimes there may be, it's not a question of blaming someone, it's just about coming up with a solution. And I think with that collaborative mentality, that's the best way to guarantee the delivery of this hugely ambitious infrastructure plan that's well underway and will continue to do so.
Roger, would you agree with Toby there that collaboration is the key to get these transport infrastructure projects off the ground?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're even looking at that construct with the sort of contractors, you know, the pain gain requirements around some of these very large projects. Because I mean, you know, as Toby made the point, you know, contractors will make a huge commitment into basing themselves and their teams and the camps around, you know, Neom, somewhere like that, very, you know, physically far from anywhere. And so the ability then to work, you know, with the client around, you know, seeing through, you know, this particular activity. So, you know, if the cash flows and the requirements around the project are clearly understood and the commitments are made, then these projects will be successful. I mean, obviously, one of the key challenges is around resource, and particularly as the world picks itself up from the pandemic, North America, Europe, Asia will equally have certain sort of economic requirements to see their economies, you know, drive upward, and equally Saudi Arabia, you know, wants to play that part. And but what will be important to ensure that is that the project and the program that's set are quite clear, so that as there are these commitments made and foreign investment comes in and access is gained, that, you know, there will the sort of follow through will happen. And I think, you know, these projects are all putting forward key experts or bringing large teams together of companies such as Atkins in order to ensure this assurance really that these projects will be delivered. And in some ways there's also some flex around them as some of the requirements will change and will tail, and thinking about technology, etc.
Yeah, and I want to move the next part of the discussion on to you know, how are we going to build these transport projects that are going to be sustainable and, you know, provide sort of a pollution-free environment for Saudi Arabia. Sustainability is obviously a core part of Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 agenda. So I'll come to Alexander on this, kind of again to give his experiences of Ancestra. Alexander, how is the kingdom's kind of transport network ensuring that its kind of up and coming projects provide, you know, 100% clean energy and are pollution free, and how can they be more kind of sustainable, make a more sustainable environment for the country? What are you doing in particular at the Riyadh Metro to align with these goals?
But there is the big picture first, and I mean already the choice to move from you know, car transport to public transport is a way to be more sustainable by essence anyway. In terms of energy as well, it's moving away from, you move away from the fossil energy to the electric energy. Now, of course, after there is always the question of the electric energy is produced, and I think the kingdom is preparing for major investment in that subject as well. It's not really my field, and maybe the others can help on this subject. But clearly, this move from fossil energy to electricity is one of the major investments. Now, that's the macro part of it. Now, on the micro aspect, actually, and the Riyadh Metro was already a challenge, and we see that for all the projects we are working on. Actually, there is clearly the investment is not only on the transport itself, but it's also on everything around. And actually, for new projects in Saudi Arabia, including the Riyadh Metro, there are very drastic requirements in terms of environmental friendly construction. We have challenges about energy saving in the buildings, in the construction, with better isolations, with better material, better equipment, which are actually less consuming energy. And that's all over the place. Also part of the Riyadh Metro, and in terms of environment, and I think Toby was mentioning that earlier. Actually, this is not only a metro project. This is a complete city reshape project, because with this metro project there is also bicycle lanes, places where actually the people of Riyadh can walk around. So now it's feasible in Riyadh. It was not the case 9 years ago, and I experienced that in the beginning, but now it's possible to go from one place to another using your bicycle or walking. It's more feasible during the good weather than in the hot summer, but it's still feasible. So basically today people use less their cars or their transportation than they used to. So this is the involvement is, as I said, on the Riyadh Metro, and we see that all over the kingdom on all the projects. They associate always the environmental, the sustainability to any project they are currently doing.
And Toby, I'll come to you next, just on the point that Alexander made about that you mentioned earlier that there's a lot of sort of cycling lanes, etc., that are coming up in Saudi Arabia. Do you think that's part of their drive to create a more kind of sustainable built environment?
I think so. I mean, yeah, it's the green urban bike share system. I'm massively intrigued by that. Just generally as well, let me give you an example on NEOM in particular, just in terms of this sustainability. Just got, just a couple of the headlines, which, I think are amazing. And autonomous hydrogen-powered underground rail system. Let's not forget that. It's hydrogen-powered. Fully autonomous mobility ecosphere, where both personal and public transport will consist only of electric vehicles. Then the line, 170 kilometers of car-free linear city within NEOM. And then the $5 billion US agreement with Air Products to develop a renewable energy project. That, in terms of renewables and renewability, are hugely forward-looking initiatives, which I think are very exciting, and NEOM's really leading the way in that regard.
And that kind of perfectly leads on to my next question for you, Roger, that there seems to be a bit of a crossover there between sustainability and the need to digitize. I mentioned kind of in the previous panel that that technology has been accelerated, particularly over the past 12 months. So what are you seeing, Roger, particularly with the movements for digitalization for the transport infrastructure sector? How is Saudi Arabia sort of moving with the times and creating a more futuristic approach?
Well, as Alexander knows as well, I mean, we did everything around the metro design in BIM. In some cases, we went to 7, 8, 9, and 10D BIM. So we're able to kind of imagine buildings and facilities before they were even constructed. So that was ongoing for quite some time to try and optimize what we do in the environment. But clearly in the last 12 months, the issues around sort of contactless travel or the notion of not touching anything when you're making your way through transport systems is coming to the fore. And I guess the expectation is that biometrics, facial recognition, and those sorts of things are going to come to the fore and will be implemented into kind of metro systems moving forward. But I was also going to make the point, we are looking and just going slightly outside the transport sector. There's so much going on in the country that is supporting what is going on. So there are health programs and this thing about the cycling. This is also to get people healthy. Otherwise, there are a certain circumstance in which the health service will be under pressure. So there are quite a number of other initiatives that are being bled into this ecosystem in order to do that. And the best way forward in this last year or so has been around digital. So we certainly are seeing huge sort of transformation in the way that we deliver, the way that we communicate, the way we calculate, all of this in order to have a firmer picture of what's been done prior and being able to sort of, outline the impacts that may happen and seek to mitigate them as much as possible. And, things like the air product, putting forward a massive initiative in order to support, NEOM. So I think whilst there are impacts, someone out there now is calculating how to mitigate them against that to get the balance right.
Okay. And we've just got probably few minutes left of this panel, so I'll come to the final question again. So again, leading on sort of what we just discussed in terms of the futuristic approach for transport projects. What do you think the future holds for these transport projects in Saudi Arabia, and how can the kingdom lead the way in terms of incorporating world-class infrastructure? Toby, we'll come to you just to start on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this has been said already, but I think one of the remarkable opportunities that the kingdom has is that there's, as I said earlier, there's a lot of blank canvas stuff going on here, not necessarily in Riyadh, but elsewhere, Red Sea, NEOM, etc. And it's so much easier to deliver a superb system if you're starting afresh with a blank canvas. If you try, I mean, I'm someone who grew up in London, and I'm used to the most dreadful public transport system, I must say. I mean, it's astonishingly bad, and the huge investment that goes into the London system is always just papering over the cracks and trying to mend a system which is just hopeless from the start. Whereas the opportunity here with the blank canvas and produce everything modern tech in this new modern tech world of technology is where I think it gives the kingdom such a huge advantage with some of these projects.
Alexander, what's your thoughts on the future of transport projects in Saudi?
Yeah, and I completely agree with what Toby just said. I mean, the advantage here, I see that we have all the good factors to develop a very efficient public transport system. It's true that if you travel in Saudi Arabia, you can see that actually you have a lot of places which are actually free of space. You just bring your system and you put it in place. They have also another thing currently. It's clear that there is a massive policy for development. So actually, I'm not saying that they have all the funds available, and of course, I think they need to pace the work. And this is a very challenging project when it comes to the money part, but there is money to build things. And there is also this, because we were speaking about the commitment about the contractor, but there is also the commitment of the authority and the end client. It's clear here that there is a very strong commitment of the higher authority in the kingdom to push for that development, for the good of the population, for the good of the people. So we have a lot of very good factors in order to develop the public transport system.
And Roger, to conclude the panel, what's the future?
I will also answer one of the questions in the chat box to make the point that there have been studies done on people's willingness to pay and move from private car to public transport. Some of that work has been done. I was going to say, what Saudi's got on its side is youth. And youth has no preconceived certain notions or ideas, not certain legacy challenges, which Toby's talking about. And so they have a huge expectation, and we are working with some really young Saudis that are just sort of saying, why can't we do this, or aren't we doing it? And the expectations are high, social media and all of those kind of things, and the fact that they see certain inventions and other projects around the world, and then have an expectation that should be brought into Saudi Arabia. So I think there's a real opportunity, because the youth is there to sort of have seen some of the issues and legacy issues, seen the torment of parents, shall we say, and are willing to sort of see another perspective, and that clearly is being led front and center by the Crown Prince.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question, Abdoullah Sinan. And yeah, that is all we have time for. Massive thank you to all of our panelists for generating such interesting insights and discussions today. Thank you, Toby, Roger, and Alexander. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you. I think we could have easily chatted for hours about this. But we are only at the halfway point for the KSA Infrastructure Conference. Join us tomorrow from 1 p.m. KSA time and 2 p.m. Dubai time to hear from some more construction heavyweights who are going to discuss about the developments of social infrastructure. So for this panel, we have Al Bawani. So we have the director and board member who is engineering Nasser Al-Shalwaf. We also have IHCC's CEO, who is Sultan Sobi Bataji. And then we also have Richard Stratton, who is the partner and managing director for Kundal in the Middle East. And then to conclude the final final panel of the conference, we're going to be discussing about the public and private partnerships. And we have, for this panel, we have Ian Williamson, who is the Chief Projects Delivery Officer for the Red Sea Development Company. We have Erin Park, who is the head of PPPs in Saudi Arabia for ENGIE. And then we also have Jesus Sancho, who is the Managing Director of ACCIONA in the Middle East. So hopefully we can see more of you tuning in tomorrow. We're also going to be sending out our attendee access link very shortly, so you're able to access the conference tomorrow. Thank you all very much and have a great day. It's a pleasure to put this on for you. Thank you.